Hey, before we dive into this week's episode, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love your support. Take just 10 seconds to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the wisdom and inspiration that I share on the Pivot to Balance podcast. Let's build a community of balance seekers together. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to share the love. Now let's dive into the episode. Hello and welcome to the Pivot to Balance podcast. I'm your host, AK, and I hope you're doing well. In a world that pulls us in a million different directions and with a billion distractions, finding balance can feel like an ambiguous quest. Join me on this podcast as I try to navigate life's twists and turns with mindfulness, purpose, and grace. In each episode, we will dive into topics like self-care, personal growth, mindset shifts by sharing practical insights, stories, and maybe even interviews. Get ready to pivot, to recalibrate, and find your balance. Follow the Pivot to Balance podcast, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome back to this week's episode. In this week's episode, we will be talking about one big thing. What is our one true purpose? And do we really need to find out our one true purpose right now? We'll talk about that. But before we get into that, I do want to make an announcement. As you can see, this episode is dropped on Thursday morning. It was very intentional. I will be dropping episodes on Thursday morning going forward because I want to see if that helps you a little bit. I've seen the data and I feel like Thursday mornings are more optimal. So let me know if you think, no, bring it back to Wednesday nights. Let me know. So today's episode, let's be real. Society makes it sound like we're supposed to have it all figured out by 18. That's wild. I've heard people say things like, find your passion, discover your why. Your purpose is waiting, don't waste time. And if you, by any chance don't have the answer by now, you feel like your existential crisis mode is just like, not just turned down, but like 100x'd. Today, we are questioning that whole mindset. Hey, if you listen to this podcast, I think you will also love my newsletter, Elevate Gazette. I talk a lot about elevating your professional and your personal lives. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. Go to anushakhannan.com/email list, and I'm sure you will love it. Join everyone who is like-minded. And now let's get into the episode. We'll talk about why not having a set purpose yet is actually okay, maybe even a good thing, and what neuroscience says about purpose development. As if you don't know, if you've not listened to my other episodes, I am very into neuroscience and I love it. And we'll also talk about why some of the world's most successful people didn't start with a clear mission. They actually figured it out on the way. And of course, I wrestled with this too. So whether you're listening on a walk, while cooking, or pretending to work, we'll break this down together. Okay, let's start with that pressure to have it all figured out. I don't know about you, but in my early 20s, I feel like I'm still in my early 20s, but I thought I was supposed to have this grand vision, like this one passion that set my soul on fire. And guess what? I didn't. And around me, I felt like everyone around me had it figured out. But now when I look back, I'm like, no, you didn't have anything figured out too. You were just better at it than me at faking it. And what I wish I knew back then, and honestly, I keep reminding myself even now, is most people don't find their quote unquote one true purpose early on. They don't. Because purpose isn't something that you find, it's something you grow into. The truth is, if you think about it, life is not a straight path. It's zigzag, it's full of pivots, full of experiments, and total left turns, right? And when we try to force a single purpose too soon, it can backfire. It's like, these reels I see on Instagram, which is like these people choose at 18 which of their favorite anime characters or anime they like, and then they just stick with it for their entire life. It's good, but studies actually show that putting too much pressure on purpose can lead to anxiety, decision paralysis, and even burnout. So if you've ever felt like you're behind because you haven't found it yet, can we just take a deep breath? You are not behind. You're exploring, and that's what you should be doing. So I talked about neuroscience, right? And this part terrifically blew my mind. This has been all over Instagram and TikTok too. Your brain isn't fully developed until your mid to late 20s. So I probably don't even have my brain fully developed at this point. The prefrontal cortex, the part that controls long-term planning and decision-making, is still in progress, which makes sense, right? Think about how much we change in our 20s. One year you think you know exactly what you want, and the next you're questioning everything. That's because your brain is still gathering data. It's still learning what excites you, what drains you, what aligns with you. Psychologist Jeffrey Arnett actually calls this phase emerging adulthood. So, which is a time when we're meant to be figuring things out. It's a period of identity exploration, testing different jobs, relationships, and lifestyles. So if you feel like your life is a little chaotic right now, I used to think that was failure, but that's not failure. That's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Collecting data, experimenting, helping you learn who you are through real world experience. And honestly, the best way to quote unquote find, because you can't find your purpose, but the best way to quote unquote find your purpose isn't to think about it for hours. It's to live your way into it. So quickly, I'll mention this. Like, you know that I do a lot of things. If you don't know, I have another podcast called The Marketing Woman. I do YouTube. I do a lot of different things. And I've been asked this question of like, which one do you really like to do? Or what is your purpose in all of this? I like doing all of it. I can't pick one and say that this is my favorite. I can definitely take times to deprioritize a few things, but I don't think I will ever be able to say like, this is my favorite project. No, that is absolutely not possible for me to say, which is why I feel like you don't have to think about it for hours. If I sat down and thought about, okay, which one of these projects is really important to me, I wouldn't be able to pick it because all of these things are tying into something that feels like my purpose, but I'm not sure what it is. So I'm just going to live my way into it. So let's shift gears a little bit. Have you ever heard of this phrase, existence precedes essence? It's an existentialist idea from Jean-Paul Sartre. I hope I'm not butchering the name. And it basically means we aren't born with a predefined purpose. We create it by how we live. That means there is no perfect script you're failing to follow. People always talk about how purpose is a journey, not a destination. But philosopher Alan Watts had another great metaphor. He said, life is more like a dance than a journey. Think about it. When you dance, the goal is not to finish as fast as possible. The point is the dance itself. As a dancer, completely agree. The movements, the rhythm, the experience. When I'm dancing, I don't think about, oh my God, I'm going to finish it. Am I going to be done soon? No, I always think about, okay, I have to do this step. Is the rhythm and my steps coordinating with each other? This is the experience. Like, how do I feel? What can I express more? And maybe purpose works the same way. Instead of stressing about finding the last song, what if we focused on the steps we are in right now? Of course, the podcast is called The Pivot to Balance. So let's talk about like pivoting. Let's look at some real life proof. Because some of the most successful people, they did not have their purpose figured out from day one. They figured it out through pivots, experiments, and even failures. Stuart Butterfield. So let's talk about Stuart Butterfield. He originally built a video game. It flopped, but instead of giving up, he noticed his team had built a great internal chat tool. So they pivoted, and that tool became Slack, which sold for $27 billion. Have you used Slack before? Think about Steve Jobs, who dropped out of college, took a random calligraphy class, and thought nothing of it. Years later, that knowledge shaped the typography of the first Mac computers. He had no clue those dots would connect until they did. Let's take Emily Wapnick, TED speaker. She realized some people don't have one true calling. They have multiple interests and thrive by exploring many fields. She calls them multi-potentialities. People whose purpose is actually variety itself. Does that sound like someone you know? So a few big things I definitely want you to take away. Number one, purpose isn't a single destination. It's an evolving journey. It's okay if your purpose keeps shifting over time. Failure, that's a sign. That's not a sign of failure. That's a sign of growth. Number two, try things. Don't just think about them. As LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman says, purpose emerges through experimentation, not introspection. Number three, stop putting so much pressure on quote unquote finding your passion. Instead of doing that, focus on what excites you right now. Passion, like I said, is not found, it's grown over time. Last one, the fourth one, stay adaptable. Life is not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. Your purpose might not be a straight climb, it might be a series of sideways moves and pivots. So, here's my challenge to you. What if, instead of chasing one ultimate purpose, you just focused on what feels meaningful today? Follow what excites you, even if it doesn't seem big, quote unquote big or quote unquote permanent yet. Let your purpose evolve. Because in the end, your life's purpose isn't something you have to find, it's something you build step by step. So, if this episode resonated with you, send it to a friend who might need to hear it, and DM me. I would love to hear about your pivots and purpose journey. Now go grab a cup of lemon water, and until next time, stay curious, embrace the pivots, and keep dancing.